Captain Sarah Chen stared at the data streaming across her command console, her coffee growing cold in the zero-gravity mug floating beside her. 3 months ago, humanity had received its first confirmed extraterrestrial communication, a distress signal from the Kepler 442 system, 47 light-years away. The message was simple, desperate, and heartbreaking: help us. They come. We die. Now, as the UES Defiance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, Sarah wondered if humanity had made the right choice in how they'd answered that call. Behind her, the largest war fleet in human history materialized from the twisted space of hyperspace jumps. 300 ships strong, bristling with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop stars. The pride of the United Earth Federation's military might, all sent to answer a cry for help from beings they'd never met. Admiral, came the voice of her communications officer, Lieutenant Torres. We're receiving multiple signals from the inner system. The alien distress call is still broadcasting, but there are also other transmissions. Sarah turned in her command chair, the magnetic locks keeping her secure in the ship's artificial gravity field. Other transmissions? Yes, ma'am. They're in a completely different language, if you can call it language. The computer is trying to decode them, but the patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Admiral Harrison's voice crackled through the fleet communication system. All ships, maintain formation. Long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures near the fourth planet. Whatever's happening here, it's big. Sarah pulled up the tactical display on her personal screen. The Kepler 442 system had 5 planets, with the fourth being in the habitable zone where the distress signal originated. What she saw made her stomach drop. The space around the planet was filled with debris, massive chunks of metal and composite materials that could only be the remains of spacecraft. Captain, her science officer, Dr. Martinez, spoke up from his station. I'm reading atmospheric disturbances on the planet's surface. There are massive craters, and the northern continent appears to be completely gone. Whatever happened here, it was recent, within the last few weeks. The weight of command settled on Sarah's shoulders like a lead blanket. They'd come here expecting to rescue a civilization under attack. Instead, they might be arriving at the site of a genocide. Sir, I'm getting a clearer picture of those other transmissions, Torres reported. They're coming from ships. Lots of them. And they're not broadcasting randomly, there's a pattern, like they're coordinating. Show me. The main screen flickered to life, displaying a tactical overview of the inner system. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Surrounding the fourth planet like a metallic storm cloud were thousands of ships, sleek, dark vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with predatory grace, circling the wounded planet below. My God, whispered Dr. Martinez. How many are there? Computer estimates between 8 and 10,000 vessels, Torres replied, his voice tight with disbelief. Admiral Harrison's voice cut through the shocked silence on the bridge. All ships, red alert. We're looking at a hostile force 10 times our size. Begin battle preparations, but hold position. We need intelligence before we act. Sarah activated her ship's internal communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We've arrived at our destination to find a world under siege by forces unknown. The inhabitants who called for help may already be dead or dying. But we're here now, and we're going to do our job. We came to help, and by God, we're going to help. Battle stations. The Defiance hummed with activity as her crew prepared for what might be the largest space battle in human history. Sarah had served in the Titan Rebellion and the Mars Independence War, but nothing had prepared her for this scale of conflict. Captain, Dr. Martinez called out, I'm detecting energy signatures from the planet's surface. Faint, but definitely artificial. Someone's still alive down there. A new voice joined the conversation, Commander Jessica Reyes from the UES Vengeance, the fleet's premier assault ship. Sarah, we're picking up what looks like massive underground complexes on the night side of the planet. If anyone survived the initial attack, that's where they'd be. Sarah studied the tactical display. The alien ships, she was already thinking of them as the enemy, were maintaining a loose blockade around the planet. They weren't actively bombarding the surface anymore, which suggested they were either finished with their work or waiting for something. Torres, are you still receiving the original distress signal? Yes, ma'am. It's coming from coordinates that match one of those underground complexes. Signal strength suggests it's coming from deep underground, maybe 2 or 3 kilometers down. Can you enhance it? See if there's more information we missed? Torres worked at his console for several minutes, his brow furrowed in concentration. Captain, there's more to the message. Much more. The computer was only translating the basic emotional content before, but there's detailed information here. Technical specifications, star charts, and warnings. Warnings about what? The ships we're looking at, ma'am. According to this message, they're called the Devourer Fleet. And Earth. Earth is marked as their next target. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Sarah felt ice forming in her veins. They hadn't just answered a distress call, they'd walked into humanity's future. Get me Admiral Harrison, she ordered. The Admiral's weathered face appeared on her screen moments later. At 62, Harrison had seen more combat than any officer in the fleet, but even he looked shaken by what they'd discovered. Admiral, we need to talk privately. Agreed. Flag officers' conference in 10 minutes. Secure channel. Sarah spent the next 9 minutes studying every piece of data they'd gathered. The aliens who'd sent the distress call, the computer had started calling them the Keth based on linguistic patterns in their message, had been fighting the Devourer fleet for over a year. According to their records, the Devourers moved from system to system, consuming all resources and enslaving or destroying any intelligent life they encountered. The Keth had fought bravely, but they'd been outgunned and outnumbered from the start. Their final message wasn't just a call for help, it was a warning. The Devourers had interrogated captured Keth officials and learned about other worlds, other civilizations. Earth was on their list. When the conference began, 7 flag officers appeared on Sarah's screen, the command structure of humanity's greatest military endeavor. Admiral Harrison spoke first. By now you've all seen the intelligence reports. We're not just looking at a rescue mission anymore. This is about the survival of our species. The question is, what do we do about it? Admiral Chan of the Prometheus spoke up. The logical choice is to withdraw and warn Earth. With this intelligence, we could prepare defenses, maybe evacuate critical populations to the outer colonies. And abandon the Keth survivors to their fate, countered Admiral Okafor from the Righteousness. We came here to help. There are still people alive down there. Sarah cleared her throat. There's another consideration. The Devourer fleet has been here for weeks. If we retreat now, they might follow us back to Earth. We could be leading them straight to our home. The debate continued for 20 minutes, but Sarah could see the inevitable conclusion forming. They were soldiers, and they'd been given a mission. More than that, they were human beings faced with genocide. Admiral Harrison made the final call. We go in. Full assault, coordinated strike. Our goal is to break their formation, evacuate as many Keth survivors as possible, and gather intelligence about Devourer capabilities. If we can damage their fleet significantly, we might buy Earth time to prepare. Sir, Sarah said, what about the numbers? They outnumber us 30-1. Harrison's smile was grim. Then we'd better make sure we're 30 times better than they are. All ships, prepare for attack. We go in fast and hard. The next hour was a flurry of preparation. The human fleet repositioned itself, with the heavy battleships forming the spearhead and the smaller cruisers and destroyers spreading out to provide flanking support. Sarah's Defiance was part of the second wave, tasked with breaking through to the planet's surface once the initial assault had disrupted the Devourer formation. Captain, Dr. Martinez reported, long-range scans of the Devourer ships are showing interesting results. Their hulls appear to be biomechanical, part grown, part manufactured. And there are massive power signatures coming from what looks like organic components. Biological ships? More like hybrid technology. It's unlike anything in our databases, but it might explain how they can field such a large fleet. If they're growing parts of their ships rather than manufacturing everything. Sarah nodded. It made sense from a logistics standpoint, but it also made the enemy even more alien and unpredictable. All ships, this is Admiral Harrison. Operation Prometheus is go. May God be with us all. The human fleet surged forward like a spear thrust into the darkness. At the tip, the massive dreadnought Titan's Fist led the charge, its fusion cannons already charging for the first salvo. Around it, 23 other battleships spread out in attack formation, their shields shimmering with barely contained energy. The Devourer response was immediate and overwhelming. The alien ships moved with fluid grace, abandoning their loose formations to swarm toward the attacking humans like angry hornets. Their weapons were unlike anything Sarah had seen, streams of what looked like living energy that writhed and pulsed as they crossed space. The first exchange of fire lit up the void between the fleets. Human fusion cannons met alien bioenergy weapons in spectacular explosions that briefly outshone the system's star. The UES Gibraltar took a direct hit from 3 Devourer ships simultaneously, its shields flaring and failing under the combined assault. Gibraltar is reporting massive hull breaches, Torres called out. They're attempting to withdraw. But there was no withdrawing from this fight. The Devourer ships moved too fast, their formations too fluid. What had started as a coordinated human assault quickly devolved into a massive furball of individual ship duels spread across millions of cubic kilometers of space. "Captain, we're approaching firing range," reported her weapons officer, Commander Walsh. "All batteries, prepare to engage. Target the smaller ships first. If we can thin their numbers, the bigger ships will have more room to maneuver." The Defiance opened fire with everything she had. Fusion cannons, particle beams, and a full spread of quantum torpedoes reached out toward a cluster of medium-sized Devourer ships. The enemy vessels twisted away from the incoming fire with movements that seemed almost organic, but Sarah's gunners had anticipated their evasive patterns. 2 Devourer ships disappeared in brilliant explosions as the quantum torpedoes found their marks. A third spun out of control, trailing what looked like fluorescent blood from massive hull breaches. "Good shooting," Sarah called out. "Reload and prepare for the next pass." But the enemy was adapting. The remaining Devourer ships in their immediate area had changed their formation, spreading out and attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. Their bioenergy weapons seemed to learn from each exchange, adjusting their frequency and intensity to better penetrate human shields. "Shields down to 60%, reported the engineering officer. That last hit did something to our defensive grid. The energy seemed to eat through the shield matrix." Sarah gritted her teeth. They were facing technology that didn't just overcome their defenses, it consumed them. Reroute power from non-essential systems. "We need those shields up." Across the battlefield, the story was similar for most human ships. The initial assault had caught the Devourers off guard, destroying or disabling nearly 300 of their vessels. But the aliens were learning fast, and their numerical advantage was beginning to tell. "Captain, Admiral Harrison is requesting all available ships move to support the Titan's Fist. She's taken heavy damage and is surrounded." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Helm, best speed toward the flagship. All ships in our squadron, follow our lead." The Defiance and her escorts charged through the swirling melee toward the center of the battle, where the massive Titan's Fist was fighting for her life. The flagship was surrounded by at least 50 Devourer ships, her shields failing under constant bombardment. Several sections of her hull were already venting atmosphere and debris. "This is Admiral Harrison to all ships. We've punched a hole in their formations, but we can't maintain this level of combat indefinitely. All ships capable of atmospheric entry, begin descent toward the planet. We need to extract those survivors now." Sarah made a split-second decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Torres, signal the Vengeance and Storm Rider. Tell them to continue the rescue mission. We're staying to cover the Admiral's withdrawal." "Ma'am, our orders were to extract survivors. Our duty is to make sure someone lives to tell Earth what's coming." The Defiance threw herself into the fight around the flagship with desperate fury. Her weapons carved through Devourer formations, buying precious seconds for the Admiral's ship to restore her shields and begin fighting her way clear of the encirclement. But the cost was terrible. The UES Prometheus exploded in a massive fireball when her fusion reactors were breached. The Storm Rider made it halfway to the planet's atmosphere before 3 Devourer ships caught her and tore her apart with their living energy weapons. "Captain, we're getting reports from the surface," Torres called out over the sound of alarms and weapon fire. "Commander Reyes has reached the Keth survivors. She's reporting approximately 50,000 individuals in the underground complexes, but her ships can only carry a fraction of that number." Sarah's heart sank. They'd come here to save an entire civilization and could barely rescue a city's worth of survivors. But even that would require holding the line long enough for the evacuation to be completed. Time estimate for full evacuation? At current capacity, 18 hours minimum. Sarah looked at her tactical display. The human fleet had been reduced to fewer than 200 operational ships, while the Devourers still fielded thousands. There was no way they could hold for 18 hours. "Captain," Dr. Martinez spoke up from his science station, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups from the larger Devourer ships." "Whatever they're planning, it's big." The answer came moments later. A dozen of the largest alien vessels, ships that dwarfed even the human dreadnoughts, began to glow with pulsing organic light. Energy cascaded along their biomechanical hulls like luminous veins, building toward some unknown purpose. "All ships, emergency withdrawal." Admiral Harrison's voice cut through the communication channels. "They're charging some kind of super weapon. All ships break contact immediately." But it was too late for evasive action. The massive Devourer ships released their stored energy in focused beams that reached across space like the fingers of an angry god. The first beam caught the UES Defiant amidships, and the heavy cruiser simply vanished in a burst of converted matter. The second beam swept through a formation of destroyers, erasing them from existence. Sarah watched in horror as beam after beam lanced out from the alien superships. Each blast consumed everything in its path, turning metal and flesh into raw energy that was somehow absorbed back into the Devourer vessels. "My God," whispered Dr. Martinez. "They're not just destroying our ships. They're feeding on them." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Devourers weren't just a military force, they were a plague of consumption that grew stronger with every victory. Each ship they destroyed, each world they conquered, made them more powerful. "Torres, signal all ships. Emergency broadcast to Earth, maximum priority. Tell them what we've learned. Tell them the Devourers don't just destroy, they consume and grow stronger. Earth needs to prepare for something unlike anything we've ever faced." "Ma'am, what about the evacuation?" Sarah looked at her display. The human fleet was scattered and broken, barely 50 ships still combat effective. The evacuation ships on the planet's surface were trapped, unable to reach orbit through the Devourer blockade. "Signal Commander Reyes. Tell her to load as many survivors as possible and prepare for a breakout attempt. We're going to give her one chance to get clear." "Captain, that's suicide. We don't have enough ships left to create a meaningful diversion." "Then we'll make do with what we have." Sarah activated the fleet communication channel. "All remaining ships, this is Captain Chen of the Defiance. We came here to save lives, and that's what we're going to do. Form up on my position. We're going to punch a hole through their lines and give our people on the surface a chance to escape." The response was immediate. Every remaining human ship, from massive battleships down to lone fighters, began converging on the Defiance. Admiral Harrison's flagship, battered but still fighting, took point position. "Sarah," came the Admiral's voice on a private channel, "you know this is a one-way trip." "Yes, sir. But those people down there trusted us to come when they called for help. We can't abandon them now." "Understood. It's been an honor serving with you, Captain." The human fleet, what was left of it, charged toward the planet in one final, desperate assault. They moved in tight formation, concentrating their firepower on the smallest gap in the Devourer lines. Fusion cannons and particle beams reached out ahead of them, carving a temporary corridor through the alien formation. The Devourers responded with everything they had. The space around the human ships became a storm of bioenergy weapons and living projectiles that seemed to hunt their targets with predatory intelligence. Ship after ship fell to the alien onslaught, but the survivors pressed on. Breakthrough! Torres shouted. The evacuation ships are launching. On the main screen, Sarah could see the sleek forms of human atmospheric craft climbing desperately toward orbit, loaded with as many Keth survivors as they could carry. The aliens, tall, graceful beings with elongated limbs and luminous eyes, huddled in the transport ship's cargo bays, witnessing the destruction of both their world and their would-be rescuers. But the Devourers weren't finished. The super weapon ships were charging again, their organic hulls pulsing with deadly energy. This time, they were targeting the evacuation vessels. "Not on my watch," Sarah muttered. She turned to her weapons officer. "Walsh, I need everything we've got targeted on those big ships. Overload the fusion cannons if you have to." "Ma'am, if we overload the cannons, it'll breach our own containment systems." "I know. Do it anyway." The Defiance turned toward the nearest superweapon ship and opened fire with everything she had. Overloaded fusion cannons sent streams of star-hot plasma across space, while every missile and torpedo in the ship's arsenal followed in their wake. Other human ships followed suit, sacrificing themselves to protect the evacuation fleet. Sarah's gambit worked. The combined firepower of a dozen dying human ships overwhelmed the Devourer's superweapons defenses, causing a massive explosion that consumed not only the alien vessel but two others nearby. The blast created enough chaos in the Devourer formation for the evacuation ships to escape into hyperspace. But the cost was everything. The Defiance was dying around Sarah, her fusion reactors failing and her hull breached in a dozen places. Around her, the last remnants of humanity's greatest fleet were being systematically destroyed. "Captain," Torres said, his voice weak from blood loss caused by shrapnel from a console explosion, "the evacuation ships have jumped to hyperspace." "They made it." Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of triumph and despair. They'd saved perhaps 10,000 Keth survivors, a fraction of the millions who had died, but still lives that would continue because of human sacrifice. "Torres, is the communication array still functional?" "Partially, ma'am." "Send one final message to Earth. Tell them we fought with honor. Tell them the Devourers are coming, and they consume everything they touch. Tell them to be ready." As the Defiance died around her, Sarah watched the Devourer fleet begin to reorganize. Some of their ships were moving toward the edges of the system, scouts, perhaps, sent to find the next target. The rest began the grim work of consuming what remained of the Keth civilization. The battle was over. Humanity had lost. But in the depths of space, racing toward Earth at faster-than-light speeds, the evacuation ships carried more than just Keth refugees. They carried data, detailed scans of Devourer technology, weapon signatures, ship designs, and tactical information. Most importantly, they carried warnings about what was coming. 18 months later, the first Devourer scouts arrived at the edge of the Sol system. They found not the unprepared civilization they expected, but a fortress. Earth and her colonies had used the time bought with human blood to prepare defenses unlike anything they'd ever imagined. The Keth survivors had shared their knowledge freely: advanced shield technology, new weapon designs, and most crucially, information about Devourer biology. The aliens weren't invincible. They could be hurt, they could be killed, and they had weaknesses that could be exploited. When the main Devourer fleet arrived 6 months later, they faced a very different humanity than the one that had answered a distress call with compassion. This humanity had been forged in the fires of sacrifice and tempered by the knowledge of what extinction looked like. The Second Battle of Earth lasted 3 days and became the turning point in what historians would later call the Consumption War. Humanity didn't just survive the Devourer assault, they won it, driving the alien fleet back and capturing several intact vessels for study. But the victory came at a price measured in entire worlds. The Devourer's path of destruction stretched across dozens of star systems, each representing billions of lives lost to their endless hunger. The galaxy would bear the scars of their passage for millennia to come. In the years that followed, as humanity and their Keth allies worked to rebuild what had been destroyed, memorials were erected throughout human space. The largest stood in Earth orbit, a simple monument bearing the names of every ship and crew member lost in the Battle of Kepler 442. At the center of the memorial, written in letters that could be seen from space, was a simple inscription. They sent a distress signal. Humanity answered with a war fleet. In answering, we became more than we were. In sacrificing, we saved more than ourselves. Captain Sarah Chen's name was carved in quantum crystal alongside 300,000 others, heroes who had died far from home so that others might live. Her final message to Earth had become humanity's rallying cry, "Be ready." And they were. The Keth survivors integrated into human society, bringing with them technologies and perspectives that enriched both civilizations. Children grew up learning about the brave humans who had crossed impossible distances to answer the call of strangers in need. The story became legend, the legend became inspiration, and the inspiration became the foundation of a new galactic alliance dedicated to protecting life from those who would consume it. But late at night, in the quiet hours when the memorial lights dimmed and the tour groups went home, older humans would look up at the stars and remember the lesson of Kepler 442. Sometimes the most compassionate response to a cry for help is to bring the means to fight for those who can no longer fight for themselves. The distress signal had been answered. The price had been paid. And in paying it, humanity had discovered that their greatest strength lay not in their weapons or their technology, but in their willingness to sacrifice everything for people they'd never met, simply because it was the right thing to do. In the end, that choice, to answer compassion with courage, and need with sacrifice, had made all the difference. The Devourers had seen humanity as just another resource to be consumed. They had failed to understand that some things, once consumed, fight back from within. The war was far from over. Somewhere in the dark between the stars, Devourer fleets still prowled, seeking new worlds to consume. But now they faced a galaxy that had learned to fight back, led by an alliance forged in the crucible of sacrifice and tempered by the knowledge that sometimes the greatest victory comes from the willingness to lose everything for the sake of others. And at the heart of it all, the lesson remained: when someone calls for help, you answer. No matter the cost. No matter the odds. No matter how far you have to go or what you have to sacrifice. You answer. Because that's what it means to be human. Doctor. Kethara stood before the massive viewport of the UES Memorial Station, watching the latest fleet exercise unfold in the space around Earth. The ships were different now, sleeker, more advanced, incorporating both human engineering and Keth biotechnology. But more importantly, they moved with a purpose that transcended mere military might. "The integration protocols are working better than we hoped," said Admiral Marcus Webb, Sarah Chen's former communications officer who had survived the battle aboard one of the evacuation ships. Torres had taken his mentor's name when he was promoted, honoring the captain who had saved his life. Kethara nodded, her luminous eyes tracking the movements of the joint human-Keth fleet. "Your species learns quickly, Admiral. Perhaps too quickly for your own good sometimes." Webb smiled. It was an old conversation between them. In the 25 years since the Battle of Kepler 442, humanity had indeed learned not just about warfare and technology, but about the delicate balance between strength and compassion that defined their relationship with the galaxy. "The new recruits are different than we were," Webb observed. "They grew up knowing that there are things out there that want to consume everything we hold dear. But they also grew up knowing that we answered a call for help from complete strangers. It's changed how they see their role in the universe." Through the viewport, they could see the newest addition to the memorial, a living garden tended by Keth botanists, where earth plants grew alongside species from 17 different worlds that had been saved from Devourer fleets. Each garden told a story of rescue, of sacrifice, and of the expanding alliance that had grown from humanity's first answer to a distress call. "Sometimes I wonder what Captain Chen would think of all this," Webb mused. "We've built something she could never have imagined from the ashes of her sacrifice." Kethara was quiet for a long moment. Among her people, she was considered young at barely 200 years old, but she had been among the survivors pulled from the underground shelters of Kepler 442. She remembered the day the human ships had appeared in their skies like falling stars, and she remembered the price paid for her freedom. "I think she would be proud," Kethara said finally. "But I also think she would remind us that the work is not finished." As if summoned by her words, a priority alert chimed through the station's communication system. Webb activated his personal display, and his expression immediately grew serious. "What is it?" Cathara asked. "Long-range sensors have detected something at the edge of the Vega system. The pattern matches Devourer energy signatures, but..." He paused, studying the data. "But it's different. Weaker. Like they're running from something." Both officers turned toward the viewport with new urgency. In the 25 years since Earth's victory, Devourer fleets had been steadily pushed back from civilized space. The biomechanical ships that had once seemed invincible were now regularly defeated by the combined forces of the Galactic Defense Alliance. But they had never been seen retreating without engaging first. "Admiral," came a voice from the station's communications center, "we're receiving a transmission from the edge of Vega system." It's a distress signal." Webb and Cathara exchanged glances. A Devourer distress signal was something no one had ever imagined possible. "Put it through," Webb ordered. The message that filled the station's speakers was unlike anything they had heard before. It was mechanical, yes, but underneath the artificial tones was something that sounded almost like fear. "Unknown vessels, this is Consumption Unit 77 Alpha, we are damaged. Pursuing entities have overwhelmed our defensive capabilities, request immediate assistance, will share consumption rights in exchange for protection." The transmission cut off abruptly. Webb stared at the communication panel in disbelief. Did a Devourer fleet just ask us for help? "More than that," Cathara said, her voice thoughtful. "They offered to share consumption rights." "Admiral, I don't think they understand what they just said." "In their language, that's equivalent to offering to share their most sacred possessions." "Sacred possessions," Webb repeated slowly. "You're saying they think we're like them? That we consume conquered worlds?" "It would explain why they've never understood human motivations," Cathara replied. "They see us rescue worlds and assume we're competing predators taking resources from them." Before Webb could respond, another alert sounded. This one was different, the distinctive pattern that indicated an incoming hyperspace signature. "Dig 1. Sir," called the sensor operator, "massive hyperspace distortion forming at grid 77 Mark 12. Whatever's coming through, it's enormous." The space near Vega system twisted and folded as something emerged from hyperspace. But what appeared wasn't a ship in any conventional sense. It was a structure, a vast, crystalline construct that seemed to bend light around itself. It was easily 10 times larger than the biggest Devourer ship anyone had ever seen. "My God," whispered Webb. "What is that thing?" The answer came in the form of another transmission, this one clear and strong. "Greetings, beings of this region. We are the architects. We have been observing your conflict with the consumption swarms with great interest. The time has come for a more direct intervention." Cathara felt her blood turn cold. "Admiral, in the oldest Keth records, there are mentions of beings called the architects. They were said to be the ones who first encountered the Devourers, millions of years ago." "First encountered them how?" "They created them." The implications hit Webb like a physical blow. If the architects had created the Devourers, then everything humanity thought they knew about the war was wrong. They weren't fighting an alien species, they were fighting a weapon that had escaped its maker's control. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "the Devourer ships near Vega are changing course. They're fleeing toward our space." On the display, they could see the scattered remnants of what had once been a significant Devourer fleet racing toward human territory. Behind them, the massive architect construct was moving with deceptive slowness, but its trajectory was clear, it was following the fleeing Devourers. Webb activated the priority communication system. "All ships, all stations, this is Admiral Webb. We have a developing situation that requires immediate attention. As of this moment, we are implementing First Contact Protocol 7. He turned to Cathara. "Doctor, I need you to gather everything your people know about the architects. Every legend, every myth, every half-remembered story. If they created the Devourers, they might be the key to ending this war once and for all. Or they might be something infinitely worse," Cathara replied quietly. Through the viewport, they watched as the first Devourer ships crossed into human space, fleeing something that terrified them more than death itself. And behind them came the architects, being so ancient and powerful that they had shaped the galaxy's deadliest predators as casually as humans might breed livestock. The greatest irony was not lost on either officer. Once again, humanity was faced with a distress signal, this time from their greatest enemies. The Devourers, who had consumed countless worlds and billions of lives, were asking for help. "Admiral," Cathara said softly, "what are we going to do?" Webb looked out at the approaching crisis and thought about Captain Sarah Chen, about the choice she had made 25 years ago when faced with a cry for help from strangers. The principles that had guided that decision hadn't changed, even if the circumstances had become impossibly complex. "We're going to do what humans do," he said finally. "We're going to answer the call for help. Even if it's coming from the devil himself." The memorial station continued its orbit around Earth, carrying within its halls the memory of sacrifice and the promise that no cry for help would go unanswered. But as the first Devourer ships crossed into human space, seeking sanctuary from their own creators, everyone aboard knew that they were about to discover whether compassion was humanity's greatest strength or its fatal weakness. The war that had begun with a simple distress signal was about to evolve into something no one could have imagined. And once again, humanity's response would define not just their own future, but the fate of the galaxy itself.